Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking those dry textbook definitions of the economy and turning them into a massive, interconnected story about human activity and, frankly, national wealth. You know, it's so easy to look at a bustling street market or a towering glass office building and just see chaos, right? But underneath all that noise is a highly structured system. And by the end of this explainer, you're going to see exactly how your morning cup of tea, the phone you're holding right now, and the roads you drive on all connect into one giant economic machine. Let's get into it. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the three economic sectors, see how they connect, and then figure out how to measure it all with GDP. After that, we'll look at a massive historical shift, uncover what we call the employment paradox, and finally, wrap up with how we actually work today. So, Section 1, the three economic sectors. We've got to start small by looking at these three distinct buckets of production. Think of these as the absolute foundation of our entire economy. First up, we have the primary sector. This is all about natural resources, literally interacting with the earth. Next is the secondary sector. This is where we take those raw natural products and manufacture them into something brand new. And finally, the tertiary sector. This one doesn't produce physical goods at all. Instead, it provides the crucial services and support that keep the first two sectors running smoothly. And here's what those definitions actually look like out in the real world. When a farmer relies on rain and sun to grow cotton or relies on biological processes for dairy, that is the primary sector in action. But when we take earth and bake it into bricks or turn raw sugarcane into sugar at a mill, that's our secondary industrial sector. And the tertiary sector, well, that's the truck driver transporting the sugar, the banker approving the loan for the mill, the IT worker writing the software, and yes, even the teacher in the classroom. All right, let's put this into practice with a quick board exam question to test ourselves. Say we have a person, let's call them X, who cultivates flowers and practices animal husbandry. Based on what we literally just talked about, which sector does this fall under? Well, because both of those activities rely completely on nature and biological processes, X is operating entirely within the primary sector. Makes perfect sense, right? Moving right along to Section 2, connecting the sectors together. Now, the really fascinating thing here is that the economy is essentially a giant chain reaction. Just imagine what would happen if farmers suddenly refused to sell their sugarcane to a particular sugar mill. I mean, the mill would just have to shut down. The secondary industrial sector relies entirely on the primary sector for its raw materials. Without the farmer, the factory is just an empty building. This linear progression shows you exactly how raw materials travel through all three sectors before finally reaching your home. Step 1, the sugarcane is cultivated. Step 2, the mill converts it into manufactured sugar. And Step 3, it relies entirely on the tertiary sector, those transport trucks, to actually reach the wholesale and retail shops. If the truckers go on strike, the farmers can't sell and the factories just overflow. It's an incredibly delicate, tightly linked ecosystem. All right, Section 3, measuring it all. GDP. Now that we see how everything connects, we have to ask a massive question. How do we actually measure the size of all this activity? Enter GDP, the gross domestic product. This is basically the ultimate macroeconomic measuring stick. It shows us how big the economy is across all three sectors in any given year. But calculating the total production of an entire country, that is a mammoth task for the government. Like, how on earth do you count every single thing produced in a nation? Well, the short answer is you don't. With millions of different items being produced, economists aren't out there counting individual cars and computers and boxes of nails. That would be completely impossible. Instead, they use monetary values. But here is the absolute golden rule of GDP you need to remember. We only count the value of final goods and services. Let's use a simple biscuit to see exactly why we do this. Let's say a farmer sells wheat for 20 rupees. A mill grinds it and sells the flour for 25 rupees. Finally, a biscuit company adds sugar and oil, bakes the biscuits, and sells them to you, the consumer, for 80 rupees. If we added the 20 plus the 25 plus the 80, we would be massively, artificially inflating the economy. Why? Because that final 80 rupee price tag already includes the value of the intermediate goods, the wheat and the flour. Counting them separately is what we call the trap of double counting. We definitely want to avoid that.
Let's zoom out now for Section 4, the Great Historical Shift.
Now this is where things get really interesting. What you're seeing here is visual proof of a massive economic transformation over a 40-year period. Just look at the bars from 1977 versus 2017. While all the sectors grew to some degree, the tertiary service sector, that green bar, absolutely exploded. It has completely replaced the primary sector as the largest producing sector in India. Today, services dominate the wealth generation of the entire nation. But listen, this explosive growth didn't just happen by accident. It was driven by four really fundamental shifts. First off, a developing country naturally demands more basic services. Think hospitals, police, government administration. Second, as agriculture and industry grow, they desperately need more transport and trade support to function. Third, as people's incomes start to rise, they suddenly want to eat out at restaurants, go on vacations, send their kids to private schools. And fourth, the absolute boom in information technology over the last few decades has created entirely new essential services literally out of thin air.
Which brings us to Section 5, the employment paradox.
Okay, so here is where we pull the rug out a bit and look at a stark reality. We've got a massive contradiction on our hands. We just established that the service sector is the undisputed king of wealth generation right now. So logically, you'd think that's where everyone is working, right? But it isn't. So where exactly are all the jobs if they aren't in the wealthiest sector?
This right here perfectly illustrates that paradox in action. Over that exact same 40-year period where tertiary wealth just skyrocketed, look at the primary sector, the blue bar representing agriculture. Paradoxically, it remains the largest employer by a massive margin. It still employs over 40% of the workforce. Why? Simply put, the secondary and tertiary sectors haven't created nearly enough jobs to absorb those workers. So you have the service sector generating massive wealth with a relatively limited number of highly skilled workers, while the vast majority of the masses are left relying on agriculture.
Let's look closer at the human element in Section 6, how we work today.
Because beyond just what sector you work in, the actual quality of your life is heavily dictated by the divide between the organized sector and the unorganized sector. The organized sector, that offers security. We're talking formal regulations, paid holidays, medical benefits, a safe working environment. But the unorganized sector, which is where a huge portion of the population actually works, means low pay, irregular work hours, zero paid leave, and absolutely no pensions. It is a highly precarious way to live your life.
And we can also contrast the public and private sectors to see who owns what. In the public sector, the government owns the assets, and their main mandate is welfare, providing basic, essential facilities to the people at a minimum cost. Think railways or public health. On the flip side, the private sector is owned by individuals or companies, and their fundamental motive is pretty straightforward, maximizing profit. Both are absolutely vital to the economy, but they serve entirely different core purposes.
So, we're going to leave you with this final thought, which is really the ultimate challenge facing developing economies today. We have this booming tertiary sector generating incredible wealth, yet an unorganized primary sector that still holds the vast majority of the actual workers. The burning question is, how can an evolving economy bridge this massive gap? How do we actually translate high GDP growth into secure, organized jobs for the millions of people still waiting for their share of the boom? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and I really hope you now look at the world around you with a much deeper understanding of the hidden gears that make it all run.